Hi, everybody. I'm Haynes. Tonight on Greater Boston, the story of a single father and his 9-year-old daughter forced out of Massachusetts by a lack of affordable housing. Plus, the head of a local nonprofit working to combat homelessness among Boston Public School students, one family at a time. Then later, restraining mental health patients can cause lasting trauma. So why has the number of restraints increased in recent years? And finally, a look at the Boston Public Library's Books Unbanned card, which gives teens and young adults across the country access to the books that may be banned where they are. Thousands of kids across Massachusetts are currently experiencing homelessness. And as housing prices in Greater Boston and beyond get steeper, the search for a stable place to live is only getting harder. For some, it's downright impossible. And that was the case for James Berger and his 9-year-old daughter, who took GBH News along as they searched for affordable housing after the relative they were living with in Boston last fall was evicted.
I can no longer pay for this hotel. I've exhausted all my financial resources, so where do me and my child go?
Big afro.
You don't know anything about that.
I used to have hair at one time.
My name is James Berger. I'm a single father. Right now we are at Sinesta Symphony Suites. We've been living here for 5 months temporarily while we await for housing.
You ready, little girl? Yeah. Here, get this water.
I was living with the relative. The relative got evicted. And I was told that I'm not eligible for any type of shelter or anything of that nature because I make above $1,700 monthly. I will be all right by myself as a man. I'll be able to wing it, but I don't feel comfortable putting her in a rooming house. So I've been paying $821 weekly since November 2nd. I'll see you later, sweetheart. I worked a lot of overtime, which I'm grateful for because it paid for the room. I worked 16 hours a day, 5 days a week for approximately 3.5 months. I would have to get up at 4:30, get me and my daughter ready. My daughter would have to come with me to my job. And then around 8:45, I would drop her off at school, return back to my job site. I would leave again to go pick her up from school. Then she would come with me to my job.
Housing is so unpredictable. So sometimes the list will move really, really slow and you could be on it for 10 plus years to something changes, funding comes through, and then all of a sudden you're getting called like, oh, you're at the top of the list. We're not going to give up, and we're pushing.
We can't keep going like this.
No, not at all. Not at all. You know, now, unfortunately, the hours that he works at work, he was taking his daughter with him because he didn't have a babysitter. And unfortunately, the job was like, you know, we try to work with you as much as we can, but we can no longer have her here. So until you can file in child care, they suspended him from work, which then affects him being able to pay for this hotel.
I'm at the end of the financial stability aspect. I can't cover this past next Friday. I got to be concerned for my daughter, and it's been long and exhausting. I just want her in a place where she feels stable. She's not saying that, but she pays attention because all day long, all she asks me, you okay? You need a hug? I know what that is. That's her checking on my stability, making sure I'm all right.
It's nice staying in the hotel. We have a gym downstairs. It's Princess Monkey. They're my children. It's been a lot of change. It has.
What has that felt like?
It's been a little stressful.
What do you like best about being here with your dad?
I'm never bored. I'm never bored.
I get most of my dances from YouTube.
My daughter's theatrical. She's loving, upbeat. She worries about me a lot.
It looks like wounded chickens to me.
Number 20, one of our favorite families.
If
a unit, which is not going to be. On the day when he can't pay the hotel bill, can we do something so he doesn't have to spend the night in the emergency room?
We made all these phone calls. We submitted all these documents. This man has done everything you've asked him to do, and we're still in this waiting game. Like, what is the issue?
One win.
At least you got you one win. That might be your last one. Let's go. I made a promise to her that I'm going to be there for her. I'm going to raise her, and so we have a strong bond.
Nothing.
Everything I'm working towards is to be able to look in the mirror at the 65-year-old me and said you did everything right.
Unlucky Jack, and you know it.
I put her in a position to be all right. That's what I'm trying to change.
Put that a 0.
I know you do, but guess what?
What?
What's going on in Georgia? How are you, and how's Jamila doing?
I'm in a good place, Stephanie. I'm happy. My daughter's happy. She has more support here, so she's happy. Everything happens for a reason, so I'm where I'm supposed to be at.
Many families across the state are facing the same kinds of barriers to affordable housing as the Burgers did. And I'm joined now by Brandy Brooks, the executive director of Higher Ground. That's a nonprofit that tried to help James and Jamila find affordable housing as part of a partnership with the city of Boston to help reduce student homelessness. Brandy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, this was obviously a powerful piece of tape, but these are stories that you deal with all the time.
Yeah, sitting here right now, it's a full circle moment for me, because when I think about Mr. Berger, I think about Jamila, I think about my own story. I was a year older than Jamila when my family experienced homelessness. And so to sit here now as an executive director of an organization and to be able to lead an organization that supports homeless students and families is truly a full circle moment for me, personally and professionally.
How pervasive is this issue? Because I feel like a lot of folks may see this story, be sympathetic, but think it might be a one-off.
It is definitely not a one-off situation, depending on what data set you look at. So according to most recent data that we received from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, in the city of Boston, there are a little over 4,300 homeless students that we know of. So those are students that have identified, their families have said, I'm homeless, I need support. But there are so many others that we know are homeless because some families may not think of themselves as homeless because they do have a roof over their head, but they're couch surfing, they're doubled up, or, living in other situations that are inhabitable. But again, they're not part of the roster. And so that's in the city of Boston. In the state, we know that there are approximately 25,000 homeless students. And so multiply that by the families, because again, I'm just talking about the students in the schools. So it's a bigger problem than we think of.
I think about also that's got to affect how they focus in class, all of these types of things, like what their academic achievement is, which we've all been told is you do well in school, you can find a way out.
Absolutely. So you think about, when we talk about just basic needs, Maslow's hierarchy, safety is important. Making sure you have a safe place to lay your head every night is important to anyone, no matter who they are. And so if you are a child, you are an adult, you are anyone experiencing housing instability, you can't focus in school. You try to go to school and you're learning about math, you're learning about ELA, but your mind is not there. You may not have eaten a full meal last night. And then so you have food insecurity coupled with housing instability, coupled with do you need additional supports, because housing may be one of the issues that you are dealing with. So what's your social emotional like? You heard the story when Jamila said, they asked her, how are you feeling, Jamila? And she said, I'm stressed. right? Like, I know what my dad is experiencing. I see him struggling. And so she's taking that with her to school. Can she focus? Can she concentrate on the studies right there in front of her? It's more difficult. And we know that students that experience homelessness, they are less likely to graduate. They are more likely to need additional supports and services. They are more likely to also be food insecure, and on and on and on.
What needs to be done on a state and even a federal level to really zero in on this issue? Because I imagine it's many factors. It's the high cost of living in Massachusetts. We saw that James and Jamila had to go out of state to try to find housing. It might be the jobs. We were just talking about raising the minimum wage and a minimum wage worker feeling trapped. And if you have this multifaceted problem, how then can you help or address this particular issue, especially when you're talking about kids like Jamila and James? Like, what support would you and your organization need to pull these families out of their situation and do it so that they stay out of homelessness?
Yes, so there are a couple of things. The first thing I do want to acknowledge is that the city of Boston and the state of Massachusetts are leaders when it comes to affordable housing. That is a fact that is indisputable. At the same time, we have thousands of families and students that are homeless. And so I can think of four things that are necessary. One is supportive housing programs, like the one we offer in terms of supporting homeless students and families. The one we offer, our partners offer. That's important. Number two would be supportive housing. You need access to housing. And one of the things that, even though the city and state have done a lot with respect to affordable housing, we need more affordable housing units and production, multifamily as well. And we need to make sure that it matches the demand. Because even though, as I said, 4,000 students are homeless right now, the housing that's built is for right now, but what about the ones that are coming up in the years to come? So that's something that needs to happen. The third thing that needs to happen when you talk about city and state resources is we need more resources and access to vouchers for families to support them if they cannot afford market rent units, right? Because affordability is always a question. It's a buzzword now. So we need more access to units, more access to vouchers. And then the fourth thing that I think is important, particularly when you think about stories like James, is always remember why we do this work. Because sometimes that piece can get lost in the sauce, is remember to put the families, remember to put the students first. And if we do that, all the other things will work themselves out. We'll get the resources we'll need. We'll get the supports and services we need. This is an issue, and the city's working to address it. The state is working to address it. And I think we all just need to collaborate in order to be able to support the families and students better.
Is there anything in the pipeline right now? We know we just signed a budget recently that's going to help address this issue.
So there are several things that are in the pipeline. You know, there's definitely advocacy for, as I just mentioned, more units, as well as vouchers, different vouchers, because as we know right now, we have a lot of undocumented families, migrant families moving into state, and so city and state resources are the ones they can access. So there's a definitely concerted push there. There's some other legislation with respect to, at the local level, around the IDP and, you know, thinking about how do we define affordability? And is it really affordable for all income levels? So I know there are efforts by the City Council and others. So there are many things being done to address this issue locally, state, and nationally.
Brandy Brooks, will be watching what happens next, and we wish James and Jamila, you know, the best of luck.
Yeah, you know, the one thing to point out about James and Jamila is they had their happy ending. It wasn't here in Massachusetts like we had hoped, but they had their happy ending. And I'm always mindful of the more than 300 families that had their happy ending here in Boston, here in Massachusetts. And so if we keep the family centered, we keep the work centered, we'll continue to support families like James and Jamila.
For sure. Next up, it's hard enough to ask for help when you are struggling with your mental health. But for thousands of people who end up in inpatient mental health care centers in the state every year, the help can end up being even more traumatizing, particularly when restraints come into play. They are supposed to be used only in cases of emergency, and the State Department of Mental Health shared a goal of eliminating the practice altogether in 2007. But as GBH News' Alexi Cohan learned, the use of restraints has only risen over the past few years, spiking to more than 9,000 cases in inpatient healthcare centers in Massachusetts last year. Alexi joins me now to discuss this. It's incredible that the cases have risen, even though there's a goal of eliminating them that is, almost 20 years old.
Right, exactly. That was something I found to just be one of the most important points of the story. I saw that philosophy statement on the Department of Mental Health website and noticed that it was published there in 2007. And so, I just immediately thought, well, let's see what's gone on with the rates. And even though some years had kind of stayed the same, I mean, in 2018, 2019, they were all around like 8,000 restraints a year, more or less. So I was thinking to myself, well, the restraints have stayed the same. They have not gone down. And then I saw this large spike that happened in 2022. So clearly the goal needs some more work.
We were speaking off camera about how this can really make folks not even want to seek the health care that they need, which could have devastating outcomes.
Yeah, that was one of the most striking things that I had learned from a lot of the sources I spoke to, and especially a lot of sources that I spoke to that didn't even make the story. As you know, Crystal, we talked to so many people who don't even end up making the final cut. But they had said that they were so traumatized or disturbed from being restrained in the hospital that during future crises, they didn't want to go back to get the help that they really needed. So you wonder, what happens to those folks?
And this is a really difficult balance between making sure that people don't hurt themselves, according to healthcare providers, but also folks who will know that this could have lasting impacts in terms of the trauma that they experience while they're restrained. How do you think that that line is being walked right now?
It's a really tough line to walk, and what makes it even harder to walk is staffing issues. A lot of my sources told me that a lot of times patients will not get their basic needs met because the nurses and the staff are so busy, and that causes them to become further agitated as time goes on, where they might just want something really simple and it's not being fulfilled. But you do have to walk that line because the safety of patients, the safety of staff is obviously really crucial. And if somebody is in danger of harming themselves or others, the law says this is the time that you can use a restraint. But I think sometimes, it's very hard to walk that line safely, but also without causing undue harm to the patient.
Was there any story or account that you got that was really striking to you?
I think the most striking account I got was the main source in my story, Jess Thompson. She was a very young woman who was taken to South Shore Hospital by ambulance on a section, and she pretty much didn't really understand what was going on. She is a yoga teacher. She has a regular job. She told me she wanted to leave the hospital. She had a yoga class to teach at 6 p.m. that evening, and so she basically calmly told the staff, I don't want to be here. I want to leave. I'm okay. She got up to walk towards the door and was immediately restrained. She was, taken down by several staffers at once, and it was extremely traumatizing for her. She told me that she has around 50 flashbacks a day. She can't receive tight hugs because she feels as though she's in the restraint. It's hard for her to lay down on her back. She will go out of her way to avoid driving past the hospital if she has somewhere to be. So it really impacted her life significantly, and it was an extremely compelling story, and I'm so grateful to her for sharing it with me, and it was very hard for her to do.
I'm sure. And in the last, 30 seconds that we have here, what's being done to address this particular issue? Because it's something I hadn't ever heard about.
Right, so there are a lot of potential solutions that I learned about from my sources. One thing is the implementation of an individual crisis prevention plan. So when you check into the hospital, this is a plan that staff can create for you and are actually mandated to do so. And it has to include your medical information, any sort of triggers that you may have, how you would prefer to be restrained if it happens, and things that can calm you down if you become upset and agitated. If that plan is in place, we can prevent a lot of restraints that'll happen by just following that plan.
Alexi Cohan, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
More than 1,500 books have been banned from school districts across the country, according to the free speech nonprofit PEN America. But through a new program at the Boston Public Library, teens and young adults from those communities can now access digital copies of those books. With the Books Unbanned Initiative, which was started at Brooklyn Public Library last year, people aged 13 to 26 can sign up for a free card, and that lets them access the BPL's collection of challenged and banned audio and ebooks. You know, it has more than 1,300 titles, including 1984, The Hate You Give, The 1619 Project, and Queer There and Everywhere, 23 People Who Changed the World. The author of that book, Sarah Prager, joins me now, as does the president of the Boston Public Library, David Leonard. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much.
Good to be with you.
Yeah. So David, I want to start with you. What made the BPL want to join in this initiative?
Well, we really felt we needed to do something. Many of these challenges that we're seeing, mostly in the last couple of years, although challenges have been with us for decades, right? Those have always existed. But we really felt we needed to do something, and we were watching what Brooklyn had done, and they've had a few thousand sign-ups over the course of the last year for their program. So in partnership with our own Boston Public Library Fund, we're able to make these materials available in an electronic format to teens in the 13 to 26-year age bracket across the country. So they go to our website, they sign up, they get a special e-card, and they get access to this special collection that is funded by private donations.
And for folks who haven't read Queer There and Everywhere, I'm going to hold it up so folks can see it right here. Sarah, talk to me about this book, and then I'm going to ask you about it ended up on banned lists.
Yeah, so Queer There and Everywhere, the expanded edition is 27 People Who Changed the World, just came out in June, is about these people, 20 LGBTQ plus people who are from history, from the BCE era through today, and it shows how LGBTQ plus people have been changing the world throughout history and making contributions to society, inventing everything from the computer to the high five. And that's important for LGBTQ plus young people to know and non-LGBTQ plus people to know. And it's important representation. And when I first saw my book ending up on banned book lists, it was very upsetting because I knew that it could prevent this important representation reaching young readers.
Because it takes a lot of work to put together a book like this. It's a lot of background and study. This other book you have here, 50 LGBTQ plus people who made history, also on a banned list, or many, perhaps.
Multiple, yes.
Yeah. So it takes a lot of work to put this together, and you obviously have a thought in mind, a reader in mind, and to see that it's being that privilege of being, not even privilege, right, to learn about these things is taken away must be frustrating.
Very, because an important part of the process is translating history to be age appropriate for each of these readers. So Rainbow Revolutionaries is a middle grade book, and I also have an elementary school age reader book, kind like Marcia, Learning from LGBTQ plus leaders. And so each of these books is crafting the content to be age appropriate. It goes through vetting through these major publishers, through multiple editors, and that's the whole idea, is making this content interesting for the age level, and often without reading it at all. People are complaining just because of the subject matter being LGBTQ and saying that the very existence of LGBTQ people is what's inappropriate, which is simply discriminatory, and saying that other people are not allowed to access these books if they want them for their children. And that's one of the main things wrong with challenges and bans to these books.
And David, as we talk about making sure that folks have access to these books? I know it's libraries' mission, their core mission is so that people have access to knowledge.
Yeah, we believe very firmly in freedom of information, and that individuals, families, parents, kids are really in charge of their own journey about what they need access to, when they need information. We see a lot of the books ending up on lists today, these challenge lists, either being focused on the LGBTQ community or on topics of racial justice more broadly. And so these are the very topics that more information, more understanding, more unpacking of our own history is really needed on. And so, you know, it says free to all on the front of the Boston Public Library, and we want to make sure that that all remains front and center in the work that we do. So this information must be available to all of our readers and patrons.
Speaking of that work, I mean, this is obviously a very political issue. Did you think that libraries would end up in the politics that's, let's be honest, very contentious right now?
Well, I think libraries throughout the country, whether they be school libraries or public libraries, still remain one of the most trusted institutions in our society, and that is true locally. Where we see great success is where the local community has a great relationship with their public librarians and school librarians and workers. Those are the people who know the communities best and know what the information is that should be available, whether it's fiction books or non-fiction books. And we would say, leave it to the experts to decide what should be on the shelves. You don't have to read it if it's not for you or your family, but please don't make barriers, create new barriers for other people to access that information.
And Sarah, I imagine the intent when you're penning a book is not to end up in a political argument that is raging across the nation.
No, it's not. It is to provide representation, education to young people and their families. And these books do that, and they should be accessible to all. One of my concerns is librarians and teachers being afraid to buy these books preemptively because they might be challenged or banned and get complaints from parents. So that soft censorship of them not being bought to begin with, not just being banned after they've been bought. And this is happening everywhere. Sometimes it's associated with, these books have been banned in Mississippi and Florida, and those are the places that often might come to mind when we think of book bans, but 45 different titles were challenged in Massachusetts last year as well. And this is on the rise everywhere and happening here, and there is a bill introduced this session to help empower the experts, the librarians who should be curating these collections. And so one thing that people can do during Banned Books Week this week is ask their local representatives to sign on to State Senator Julian Sears' bill on the freedom of expression, which helps to prevent these book challenges by allowing librarians to be the ones to decide what books are allowed to be in libraries.
Perfect. All right. And we'll have that information on our website. Sarah and David, thank you so much for your time.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.
For more information on the library's Books Unbanned card, head to bpl.org. All right, well, that's it for tonight. I'm Crystal Haynes. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.